It stalked into camp when the day was damp and chilly and cold. It crept by the guards and murdered my pods with a hand that was clammy and bony and bold. And its breath was icy and mouldy and dank, and it killed so speedy and grudgingly greedy that it took away men from its company rank. The Flu by Private Josh Lee, 1919. This poem depicts the Spanish flu, also known as the 1918 flu pandemic. This poem. What is the Spanish flu? The Spanish flu was an unusually deadly influenza caused by the H1N1 influenza A virus. This pandemic helped turn the tides of World War I. Initial symptoms of the illness included a sore head, tiredness, a dry hacking cough, a loss of appetite, excessive sweating, and stomach problems, followed by pneumonia and other respiratory complications. This explains why it is difficult to determine exact numbers killed by the flu. The Spanish flu lasted from January 1918 to December 1920. It is known as the Spanish flu as the Spanish were the first country to report the virus. However, it is widely believed that it started in Kansas, USA. It infected an estimated 500 million people, about a third of the world's population at the time, and killed a staggering 50 million. By the summer of 1918, the virus was quickly spreading to other countries in mainland Europe. Hungary, parts of Germany and France were affected. Absences in armament factories reduced production. By June 1918, the flu epidemic had reached Britain. In London, reports on government workers absent due to the flu ranged from 25% to 50% of the workforce. The epidemic had rapidly become a pandemic, making its way around the world. In August 1918, 6 sailors died in Canada. In the same month, cases were reported in Sweden and South Africa. The first wave of influenza was comparatively mild. The troops in World War I called it 3-day fever, knock-me-down fever, or a grip. It rarely killed, but men who got it were out of action for days and lead-footed for weeks. However, a more lethal strain of the disease emerged in August 1918. Pneumonia often developed quickly, with death usually coming 2 days after first indications, and in rare cases in only 12 hours. The third wave of the pandemic occurred in the following winter, and by spring the virus had run its course. In the 2 later waves, about half the deaths were unusually among 20 to 40-year-olds. The pandemic would kill more soldiers than the conflict of World War I. In America, it would kill more men than World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. The flu virus is highly contagious. Its mode of transmission is airborne. Respiratory droplets are generated and transmitted into the air when an infected person coughs, sneezes, or talks, and can be inhaled by anyone nearby. Additionally, if an uninfected person touches an object with the virus and then touches his or her mouth, eyes, or nose, they can, too, become infected. The New York City Department of Health strictly enforced a sanitary code amendment that made spitting in the streets illegal. Health officers imposed quarantines and ordered citizens to wear masks. They shut down public places, including schools, churches, and theaters, turning them into hospitals, urging people to avoid crowded places or simply other people. People were advised to avoid shaking hands and to stay indoors. In June 1918, a public notice appeared in the British papers advising people of the symptoms of the flu. Even as people were dying, there was money to be made by advertising fake cures. The former mint advert stated that mints were the best means of preventing the infective process, and that everyone, including children, should suck 4 or 5 of these tablets per day until they felt better. When the 1918 flu hit, doctors and scientists were unsure what caused or how to treat it. There were no effective vaccines, antivirals, or drugs that treated the flu. Complicating matters was the fact that World War I resulted in a shortage of doctors in some areas, and many of the physicians who were left became ill themselves. Remedies included eating cinnamon, drinking wine, or even drinking oxo's meat drink, beef broth. At one point, the use of aspirin was blamed for causing the pandemic, when it might have actually helped those if given the correct dosage. Before the spike in deaths attributed to the Spanish flu in 1918, the Journal of American Medical Association had recommended the use of aspirin. Medical professionals advised patients to take up to 30 grams of aspirin per day, a dose now known to be toxic. For comparison's sake, the medical consensus today is that doses above 4 grams are unsafe. Symptoms of aspirin poisoning include hyperventilation and pulmonary edema, and it's now believed that many of the October deaths were actually caused or hastened by aspirin poisoning. Thank you for listening.